Hey everyone, welcome to the 9th episode of The Power of Bold. What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Thanks for tuning in to episode 9 of the podcast. I'm really happy that you're here, and I hope you enjoyed our last episode, where I interviewed Tess Vigeland, who is a former anchor of NPR's Marketplace, and who decided to quit her job one day without a plan B. She's the author of the book called Leap, Leaving a Job with No Plan B to Find the Career and Life You Really Want. And as I discussed last episode, it was one of the books that really inspired me to leave my job earlier this year. And I'd recommend looking at it if you feel like you're stuck or uninspired with your current gig, yet you don't really know what to do. I really enjoyed speaking with Tess, and I have some exciting guests on the horizon, so stay tuned. Other than that, I'm continuing to build my startup, which again is called Suspend the Rules. It's a newsletter that's offered 5 times a week that summarizes the daily news in talking points form. I'm looking for beta testers to give feedback about the site and the talking points that I deliver to readers. So if you're interested, head on over to suspendtherules.com and subscribe. As I'm continuing to build out this experiment, I'm really reflecting on the lessons that I've learned. And I'll likely talk about these lessons in more detail in a future episode. Okay, for this episode, I wanted to pull out another book from my library and give it a good review for you guys. And as I was going through, one book really stuck out to me. It's one of the more interesting books that I've read in the past year, and the story behind the author is even more interesting. The book is called How to Fail at Almost Everything and Still Win Big, and it's by Scott Adams, who's most famous for creating the Dilbert comic series. I'm excited to share my thoughts about the book with you. So with that said, let's get into it. It was early 2016, and I was reading more and more about the upcoming presidential election. The Iowa caucuses were in early February, and I was trying to learn as much as I could about the candidates, their positions, but I also wanted to learn about the horse race and who had the best odds of becoming the Democrat and Republican nominees. One day I was reading Above the Law, which is an industry blog for big law attorneys, and then I found a blog post referencing this guy named Scott Adams and his analysis of Donald Trump's campaign. I went to his website, which is blog.dilbert.com, and began reading about his opinions of the Donald. I was intrigued by his confidence that Trump would not only win the Republican primary, but he would actually beat Hillary Clinton in the general election. I thought he was wrong, but I was really interested in his takes. He would say things like, Trump is a master persuader. He's a hypnotist. The Trump campaign is essentially like a 3-act movie where the hero, here Trump, is going to emerge victorious. I haven't gone back and looked at his analysis knowing what we know now, but I'm sure it's pretty fascinating. Well, anyway, after Trump won the election, I wanted to know more about the guy who saw it coming. And that's when I came across Scott's book, which again is called How to Fail at Almost Everything and Still Win Big. Now, before I begin with the book, I want to be clear that Adams has some pretty controversial views on a variety of topics, like politics and gender, so I want to make sure that you understand I don't endorse any of those opinions. But putting his views on those topics aside, I found the book to be an interesting way to look at success in life, and how Adams didn't follow the quote-unquote right path in making his success and wealth happen. So to start off, I really liked the book. It's a collection of insights about success interspaced with personal vignettes. Adams looks at the world pretty differently compared to others, and he really makes you think about how you can achieve what you want in life. The book is about 230 pages, and I have it all marked up, as it's chock full of information about different ways of achieving success, whatever that may mean to you. But just to talk about the title of the book at first, How to Fail at Almost Everything and Still Win Big. Adams, at the beginning of the book, describes all of the failures that he's been involved with. It's pretty interesting. He tried to create a Velcro rosin bag for tennis players, a couple computer games, a crackpot idea website, a grocery home delivery website, and a couple of restaurants, among other things. While all these ventures didn't really work out, he learned skills along the way that allowed him to become successful with his Dilbert empire. So the question is really how he learned these skills and kept up the motivation to keep failing until he stumbled upon success. Like I said, the book is full with insights interspaced with anecdotes from Adams' life. It's not a narrative per se. It almost seems like a collection of blog posts on a variety of topics, from goals to diet to achieving happiness. There are too many lessons to include in a fairly short podcast episode, so I'm going to just talk about the 5 insights that I found most interesting. Those insights are, first, we should prefer systems over goals. Second, the importance of deciding versus wanting. Third, the importance of maximizing our energy. Fourth, recognizing our talents and knowing when to quit. And fifth, Adams' success formula. Let's get started. So first, I want to mention Adams' take on goals versus systems. I found this to be one of the most profound chapters of the book. And to illustrate the concept, Adams talks about when he was 21 years old and on a flight. He was seated next to a businessman in his 60s, and then he asked the businessman what he did for a living. The man said that he was CEO of a company that made screws. Then he offered some career advice to Adams. He said that every time he got a new job, he immediately started looking for a better one. Instead of looking for a job when it was necessary, he said it was an ongoing process. And Adams makes an explicit point about this. He says that he favors systems over goals, and he argues that people who use systems do better and accomplish their dreams. Speaking about the businessman, he says that if he approached his career with a specific goal in mind, or perhaps specific job objectives, like his boss's job, it would have limited his options. But for the businessman, the entire world was his next potential job. I think Adams makes a prescient point when he speaks about goals versus systems. He's blunt in saying that goals are for losers, but what he really means is that people who have a goal in mind spend every moment existing in a state of nearly continuous failure that they hope will become temporary when they actually accomplish their goal. So, if their goal is to lose 10 pounds, for example, the feeling of constantly failing until you reach that point of losing 10 pounds bears on people, and it becomes uncomfortable. He says that even if you do achieve that goal of losing 10 pounds, you celebrate and you feel terrific, but only until you realize that you lost the thing that gives you purpose and direction. So he argues that this discussion is burdened by semantics, but all he's really trying to say is that goals and systems are very different concepts. Goal-oriented people are in a state of continuous pre-success failure, at best, while people who emphasize systems succeed every time they apply their systems, and that's in the sense that they did what they intended to do. So I think that this is a really interesting way to look at it. It's a mental state over anything else. A system gives you more encouragement if you're feeling down, and I really think that it'll lead to success in the long run. It's because you're creating habits rather than a defined goal, and once you reach whatever goal that you have, you really lose that progress that you make in the sense that, oh, I need to set another goal, and I'm entering this temporary point of failure until I reach that goal. So for instance, Adams says that losing 20 pounds could be a dieting goal, but eating right is a system. Running a marathon in under 4 hours is a goal, but exercising daily is the system. And for the business people out there, making $1 million is a goal, but being a serial entrepreneur is a system. A goal is a specific objective that you either achieve or don't sometime in the future, while a system is something you do on a regular basis that increases your odds of happiness in the long run. So really, his thesis is that the most successful people follow systems rather than goals. And he mentions, for example, Warren Buffett, who follows a system of value investing, versus the individual investor who buys a stock because they expect it to go up 20 or 30% within 1 year. Now, true, the difference is a bit fuzzy, and you could argue that all systems have goals within them. But if you really think about it, I think he has a strong case for why we should look at systems. Systems keep us motivated, and compared to goals, we don't feel like we're in a perpetual state of failure while we're working on our system. By considering systems, we're in a state of success every time we work on that system. As for Adams, he says in the next chapter that his system was creating something the public wants and reproducing it in large quantities, essentially working on something that's scalable. Now, while working on the system, he had a string of failures, but he says that had he been goal-oriented, he probably would have given up. But being systems-oriented, he says that he felt himself growing more capable day by day, no matter the fate of the project he happened to be working on. And that is what led him to ultimately create Dilbert and make his name in the world. Next, I want to speak about the importance of wanting versus deciding. This is another insight that seems pretty obvious once you hear it, but there's more to be said. Adams says that there's extraordinary power in the phrase. If you want success, figure out the price, decide, and then pay for it. He says that he knows of so many people who wish they were rich or famous, wish they had servants on their command or private jets at the ready. But he says that few of these wishful people have decided to have any of the things that they wish for. Once you decide, you take action. He says that wishing starts in the mind and generally stays there. But when you decide to become uber successful, it means that you acknowledge the price, and that, most importantly, you're willing to pay it. And it can be a variety of things. Whether you sacrifice your personal life to get better grades in school, whether you major in something that you don't find terribly interesting but it could be lucrative, or whether you start a business which may set you up for embarrassment, bankruptcy, lost friends, or even divorce. Adams says that successful people not only decide that they're going to accept these consequences in pursuit of their dream, but, connected with the first insight I said, they develop systems to pursue success effectively. And the system is so crucial in Adams' mind. That said, he says that the price to pursue success can be lowered greatly if you pick the right system. And to illustrate the importance of wanting versus deciding, Adams speaks about his own life, particularly his first semester at Hartwick College in New York. He partied a little too hard and was put on academic notice. His scholarship would be taken away unless he got his grades up. He also received a severe case of mono, and the college physician advised him that his best bet would be to pack up his stuff and actually drop out. Adams then says it was one of those times where the difference between wishing and deciding really mattered. He didn't wish to stay in school, he decided. For the next 2 weeks, he stayed awake as long as he could in the hospital to read up on his textbooks and keep up with what the class was studying. After he was released from the hospital, he discovered he was actually 1 month ahead of the class, and he ultimately raised his grades enough to graduate. That's his story, but I think that this discussion of wanting versus deciding is another important one, just like systems versus goals. It's a subtle difference, but it can do wonders in helping you achieve success, whatever that is. Consciously deciding that you want to make $1 million before 30, for instance, will really kick you into gear. You'll develop plans and get in touch with people that can help you. Strange things will happen, for the better, once you make that conscious decision. And if you want to learn more about this general idea, I'd suggest picking up Napoleon Hill's book, Think and Grow Rich, as the book speaks about the power of visualization, desire, and execution. So after speaking about systems versus goals and deciding versus wanting, I want to briefly talk about chapter 11 of the book, which is called The Energy Metric. Again, Adams provides a seemingly simple insight on the surface, but it's one that's important to delve into further. To sum up the thesis of this chapter, Adams says that he makes choices that maximize his personal energy, since that makes it easier to manage all of his other priorities. It seems pretty simple, right? Sure, he says that maximizing personal energy means eating right, exercising, avoiding all unnecessary stress, and getting enough sleep. But he also says that it means having something in his life that makes him excited to wake up. It's really a chain. When he gets his personal energy right, the quality of his work is better, he can complete it faster, he feels relaxed and energetic, and these things make great things happen in his personal life. Becoming a person with good energy lifts the people around you, helps improve your social life, your love life, and your family life. Now, just to be clear, Adams doesn't say that energy means you're hypercaffeinated and bouncing off the walls. He sees energy as a calm, focused feeling that gives you a positive lift, either mentally or physically. Now, I personally can relate to what he's saying. A lack of energy really takes a toll on life, and not only affects your career, but your relationships as well. And I felt this lack of energy at my old job, which clearly wasn't a good fit for me. The day seemed like a fog. I felt lethargic and just dissatisfied with the way things were going. As for Adams, he says that shopping is an energy killer for him. The moment he walks into a busy store, he feels the energy drain from his body. And I'm sure there are some immediate examples that come to mind for you. I suppose the main thing is that you have to understand yourself, your preferences, and the ways that you best work. And Adams recommends that you match your mental state with an activity that you're taking on. For him, he can do his best creative work when he first wakes up, and he feels best when he exercises at around noon. So I think it's worth taking a look at your current routine and asking yourself whether you feel lethargic at certain points of the day, or not as productive as you could be. If so, is there any way you can change up your routine to maximize the energy that you have throughout the day? You may want to think about working out during the day, taking a quick walk, or finding some other activity if you fade at 2:30 or 3 o'clock like I do. Personally, I also really liked how Adams spoke about the sitting position to maximize energy. I think this is pretty underrated. He says his experience is that when he sits in a position he associates with relaxation, like slumping on a couch, his brain will start becoming lazier. But when sitting with good posture, with both feet on the floor, it signals to his brain that it's time to concentrate on work. Now, I really love this insight, as I think it's not only good to maximize your energy by doing this, but also to maximize your health and avoid slouching. And Adams isn't necessarily saying that you have to sit straight up when working, or that you can't sit on the couch when you work. The important thing for maximizing your energy is to avoid using the same position for work as you do for relaxation. So if the couch is where you like to take a nap or watch TV, it's probably not the best place for doing serious work. Now, Adams wraps up the chapter by speaking about priorities and how to keep them straight to maximize your personal energy. While priorities between your health, job, family, and relationships may overlap and potentially conflict, he recommends that one way to keep your priorities straight is by judging how each of your options will influence your personal energy. He admits it's not a foolproof plan, but if a particular path will make you feel more stressed, unhealthy, and drained, it's probably the wrong choice. For instance, if your boss asks you to work the weekend to finish something that you deem worthwhile and challenging, it may actually be worth to give up a little of your personal time and health to do that task. If things work out, you may be promoted, and meaningful work can be energizing. But if your boss always asks you to work the weekends to go over routine administrative work, it may be deflating, and it may be time for you to move on so that you can maximize your personal energy. These are just things to think about, and he's definitely not saying you need to quit your job if it doesn't bring you happiness or energy every single time. But I do think this emphasis on maximizing your energy is important, regardless of whether you like your job or not, whether you have good relationships or not, or whether you feel like you're on track with your goals or not. Combining the maximization of energy with deciding on being successful and developing a system to reach success is a deadly effective combination. As for the fourth insight from the book, Adams speaks about recognizing your talents and knowing when to quit. I found this to be an interesting chapter. He starts it off by assuming that most of his readers don't have world-class talent in one thing, or were child prodigies in another thing. Instead, Adams focuses on guiding the majority of us who have ordinary talents. I'm going to talk about his ultimate thesis in a few minutes, but he basically says that combinations of ordinary talents can add up to something extraordinary. He does recommend that we go back to the beginning, though, and look to what we were obsessively doing before we were 10 years old. His argument is that there's a strong connection between what interests you and what you're good at. People are naturally drawn to things they're comfortable doing, and comfort is a good sign of talent. As for Adams, he was always doodling and drawing as a kid, which perhaps was a good marker for him becoming the creator of Dilbert. Now, this idea isn't that revolutionary. People always say that to recognize your talents or passions, you should go back to what you enjoyed doing before money became a consideration, and go back to what you were naturally drawn towards. I didn't find his commentary on this idea that insightful. What's interesting, however, is his next sign for recognizing your talents. That is, looking at your tolerance for risk. He says that people generally accept outsized risk only when they accept big payoffs. For Adams, the big risk was drawing humorously inappropriate comics involving teachers and students back in his early days. Drawing these comics made him happy, and to him, it was well worth the risk. As another example, Adams mentions Bill Gates and Steve Jobs. Gates for the fact that he could hone his technical skills by stealing time on a mainframe, and for Jobs, and Steve Wozniak for that matter, they created their first product which involved technology that allowed people to steal long-distance calls. I think his discussion on all of this was great. If you're trying to recognize what you're good at, I'd ask yourself what risks you took, or are currently taking, to fulfill some personal passion that you have. And make sure that no one else is forcing you to do it. What sort of risks do you take now that you may not consider risks, but other people, not in your situation, may consider risky? Now, as you get older, Adams recommends that we try different things, essentially sampling different tasks or careers. He's basically recommending that we take little bets, and if you're an entrepreneur, trying different ventures and bailing out quickly if necessary. He then uses this discussion of pivoting as a way to segue into discussing knowing when to quit. And he says this mostly in relation to a product or service. So the discussion, I'd argue, is more for entrepreneurs or people who are trying to create something new. First, he says, and I agree with this, that persistence can be useful, but sometimes the writing is on the wall. He says that he's noticed a pattern, which is that things that will someday work out well start out well. Things that will never work out start out bad and stay that way. Small successes can grow into big ones, but initial failures rarely grow into successes. So that's his first point. If you're really trying to make something work, and you're getting no traction at the beginning, you may want to think about altering course soon, essentially pivoting. Even if your product is bad, if customers are clamoring for the product, it's a good sign. This happened with cell phones, fax machines, and personal computers. All of the technology wasn't there in the beginning, and it didn't work regularly. Yet demand started strong and stayed strong. Initial quality doesn't predict success. Rather, demand predicts success, even if the product isn't quote-unquote great. And Adams even goes to talk about the early days of Dilbert. He states that the thing that predicted Dilbert's success in year one was that it quickly gained a small but enthusiastic following, even though he wasn't the best artist or the funniest writer. Ultimately, he calls it the enthusiasm factor. It's elusive and hard to predict about what makes some percentage of the public super enthusiastic about a product or service. But when it's present, some subset of the public picks up on it right away, regardless of the initial quality. That quality will happen later, and he uses the example of the iPhone as a product whose first version was kind of a mess, yet was greeted with an almost feverish enthusiasm. Finally, Adams recommends that you look to what customers do about an idea or product, rather than what they say. People tend to say what they think we want to hear, or what they think will cause the least pain. What people actually do is far more honest. The point is that it's generally true that if no one is excited about your art, product, or idea in the beginning, they never will be. But if the work inspires some excitement and some action from customers, get ready, because you may have something promising. I'd keep this point in mind as you go about building your product or service. Really, there's a fine line between whether there is enthusiasm or not for the earliest version of your product. He even calls it an X factor. If you don't have initial enthusiasm, I wouldn't say you need to immediately pivot. But think about why you're not getting as much traction as you thought. Can you maybe make some little changes or conduct some little experiments? It may be something with your website, your copy, or something else. But if you still aren't getting the initial traction that you were expecting, it's likely time to speak to customers, pivot, or if all else fails, move on to something else. Finally, for the fifth insight from the book, Adams discusses his success formula. Again, this is one of the major insights I took away from the book, And it's pretty inspirational, especially for those of us who don't know exactly what we want to do with our lives. He makes it clear that he isn't speaking about excellence or being world-class in a certain skill. Rather, the idea is that you can raise your market value by being merely good, not extraordinary, at more than one skill. So if you had to break this down into a math formula, Adam says that good plus good is greater than excellent. If you're not one of the best performers in the world at some skill or something, Adam says you're better off being good at 2 complementary skills than being excellent at one. He admits that some skills are more valuable than others, but there's a general rule of thumb that if you think of each skill in terms of doubling our chances of success, it'll steer your actions more effectively than if you assume the benefit of learning a new skill will get lost in rounding. The simplicity of the formula trumps accuracy. In fact, Adam says that he thinks it's important to think of each new skill you acquire as doubling your odds of success. If you just accept this, your behavior will be guided in a way that will increase your odds of success. And Adams uses himself as an example. His writing skills are good, not great. He doesn't draw that well, and he's usually not the funniest person in the room. But he does have years of corporate experience, plus an MBA, which many cartoonists don't have. His combined mediocre skills, he argues, are worth far more than the sum of the parts. When he combined his business skills with bad art skills and fairly ordinary writing talent, the mixture was powerful. With each new skill, his odds of success substantially increased. Really, he says that the gathering of skills is your competitive advantage. Learning as much as you can in different fields can make you more valuable in whatever field you're working in. Even reading about different topics in a newspaper or internet news website will help sharpen your competitive advantage. Now, I think there's something to be said about the phrase, jack of all trades, master of none. And we live in a world of increasing specialization. That said, I don't think specialization and Adams' advice are mutually exclusive. I just think his point is that there is value in continuing to learn skills, even if they aren't totally complementary with your main gig. And I can definitely see the value in this. In the next chapter, he goes into skills that adults should be familiar with. You don't necessarily have to be an expert in all these skills, but by gaining these skills and using them in conjunction with what you're doing, you'll become that much more likely to obtain success, whatever it means to you. I won't go into all the skills he mentions. You can read his take on them if you're so inclined. But the skills are public speaking, psychology, specifically psychological biases, business writing, accounting, design, conversation, overcoming shyness, a second language, golf, proper grammar, persuasion, technology, and proper voice technique. If you can become relatively good with those skills, you can combine them with your current gig, using these skills like building blocks to increase your odds of success. Whatever you ultimately want to accomplish, gaining some good familiarity with these skills can only help, not hurt. So there you have it. Those are the 5 most important insights I gathered from Adams' book. Now, I'm sure there are other insights that would speak to you, and if you're interested, I'd recommend buying or renting the book. I didn't go into a number of things here, and I'm really thinking of Adams' views on Trump and hypnosis, which are extremely interesting. Nevertheless, he's an interesting guy, and is someone that I would consider a nonconformist. Really, the bottom line is that our careers are long journeys. Progress doesn't happen in a straight line. There will be setbacks and dark moments. But if you focus on systems over goals, actually decide that you'll be successful, focus on maximizing your energy, recognize your talents, including knowing when to quit, and acquiring skills, you'll be on your way to achieving your ideal future. Just keep working hard, and it'll happen. So that's it for this episode of The Power of Bold. As always, I encourage you to get in touch. Feel free to visit thepowerofbold.com for show notes and links to our social media accounts. And if you like what you've heard, I highly encourage you to write a review on iTunes. I'd greatly appreciate it. Thanks again, and see you next time.